You fought him, the ground ball play, the hits, the collisions, running through him, running by him. Better on the face-off. We got to continue to do better on the face-off. Got more to work on. Great game to build on, guys. You know, the last 3 weeks have been absolute misery for everybody in this huddle. Now we're back where we got to be in the second half of the season with 4 games to go.
You know, we don't care who plays where. You know, we're trying to go out and put together the best lineup that gives us the best opportunity to beat the next team on our schedule.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Taking the Field with Stevie Mac. I don't know if this is really a good or a bad thing, but prior to recording this episode here on a Friday, heading into, what is this now, week 8, I believe, in the PLL, I had a Jersey Mike's sub sandwich before recording this episode. It was one of the giant sizes that they have there, and I'm not sure if this is a good or bad thing, but I ate the entire thing in one sitting. So again, like I said, not sure if that's such a good or bad thing, but hey, that thing was really good, so I think it was well worth it in the end. But that first audio that you heard to start the show was Atlas head coach Mike Pressler in the locker room after their game a week ago, talking about the win over the Chrome. Said he felt like they did well with their strategy on the faceoff, has some things moving forward that they want to implement now with that, and I have some ideas on what that could be or what it might be moving forward. I can get into that maybe sometime this weekend, especially before their game on Saturday afternoon against the Archers at 3 p.m. Eastern. So if you guys are interested in my thoughts on that, you can hit me up at Stevie Mac Media on Twitter to get my thoughts on that. I won't necessarily dive into that with this episode at all. And that second bit of audio you heard was Andy Towers kind of talking post-game last weekend about guys not really caring what position they play. When you're talking about guys like Dane Smith or whoever, they can go between the midfield or play attack, which they've had him doing a few times here in the past few weeks. But guys essentially not really caring where they play on the field. It's more so just finding the best guys to put on that 19-man roster and just kind of letting them go out there and play regardless of what position is next to their name on that lineup sheet. But a couple things I want to get into real quick to lead things off here on this episode. I want this episode to be about you guys and get to your comments and questions. I know I've been away from the show for about 2 weeks now, I think it's been, because of some technical difficulties that I ran into with that last episode a couple weeks ago. I had been in the process here recently of getting a new laptop to run the show off of, so I did that the other day, which is why the show, at least for now, is back, as I was able to get things up and running again. So I do want to get to some of your comments and questions here with the bulk of this episode, but a couple things I wanted to touch on here to start things out was that Atlas Chrome game from a week ago. Like I said, you heard that audio from Atlas coach Mike Pressler to start things out, but that game a week ago, I would describe it as it was ugly, but it was a must-win, and it was a must-win for both sides. They talked about it, the Atlas did, in their practice the day before. They talked about this is a playoff game for us, right? For both teams, really. Like, your season a week ago was on the line in that game, and it didn't necessarily have to be pretty. I didn't really, for the most part, expect it to be pretty, but it was about just making a play when a play was there to be made that was going to put the game in your favor, and I felt like the Atlas did that. The defense, for the most part, was way better than what we had seen in weeks past, but I did say going into that matchup, it was the league's worst defense against the league's worst offense, so one of the two things was going to have to be different in that game for either side to win, but their defense, for the most part, was better. Again, granted, going up against who they were in the opposing offense for the Chrome, but again, they were better. I think that their communication was better. I think guys didn't look as lost out there. Yes, they had some lapses at times. Like I said, it was better, but not great. So they did have a few lapses here and there. I thought Kincannon, for the most part, was back to his normal form that we're used to seeing from him. Gave up at least 1-2. I remember maybe there was 2-2s in there, but he was also slamming the door on those crease looks as well. So again, kind of getting back to form with what we're used to seeing from this defense and from Kincannon in specific. But one thing I really liked that they did defensively was they had Tucker Durkin ready to fire off a slide and just absolutely take somebody's head off just time and time again. Anytime a Chrome offensive player tried to dodge through the center of that defense, they knew that if they were going to do that, he was going to come bearing down on them, and he put them on their asses more than a few times I remember in that game. So I think if they can play with that kind of energy and intensity and just having somebody in the middle of that defense like Tucker Durkin who's just going to continually pound you into the turf, yeah, I think over the course of 4 quarters of a game, it's going to wear out an opposing offense. And you look at some of the offenses they're going to have to go up against these last 4 games of the regular season, and that starts this weekend in Baltimore with the Archers and the gunslingers that they have. Putting guys like Mac O'Keefe into the ground every time he shoots the ball is going to leave an impression on him, believe it or not. And then the other thing I wanted to get into was the Cannons and just how unbelievably hot this team has been over the past month of the regular season. Because I remember going back post week 2 after they started 0-2, I said, look, for me, a successful season for this team is going 4-4 the rest of the way, especially with how things have gone this season in the PLL. Just week to week, you never know what's going to happen. And all it takes is stringing 2, 3, maybe even 4, if you're lucky enough to get 4 in a row wins in a row together. You can really make a move up those PLL standings, and they've done just that. They've won 4 in a row since I made those comments about just needing to go 4-4 the rest of the way. And this weekend against the Water Dogs, I definitely think they have a shot at going for 5 in a row. And that's something that with one of your comments I'll get to here in just a little bit. But I mean, you look at the offense has been better than what it's been in years past. And there was some discourse on PLL Twitter, on lacrosse Twitter, about them looking better without Lyle than maybe they did in the past with him. I'm not going to get into that discussion here again. That's not really the point of what this episode is, but there was a lot of discourse going on lacrosse Twitter about that about a week or 2 ago. But again, the offense has looked better. The defense started out the year a little bit slow, kind of like the Atlas, but they quickly, I think, adjusted and figured things out, adding some guys from the player pool, Cade Van Raphorst being one. I believe he'll be active for this weekend against the Water Dogs, but they've made adjustments and they've continued getting better week after week after week. And even going back to the comments that head coach Brian Holman made after that week 2 loss, he said, I know the guys aren't going to want to hear this right now, but we are getting better. Every week our goal has to be just focusing on us getting better, not necessarily maybe focusing on the matchup, but just more so focusing on us and getting better each week. So I know they don't want to hear that right now, but it is true. We are on track with where we want to be. And I think even for him, maybe, I don't even think he thought that they'd be where they are right now at this point in the season. I think even he thought maybe it would take a little bit more time to really get things rolling. But once they did, once they got that first win, they got that second win, they've really just taken it and run with it and never looked back. And now, like I said, they are probably one of the hotter teams in the PLL right now. So coming up, segment 2, we'll round out the show here on Taking the Field with Stevie Mack, getting your thoughts, your comments in the mix. Like I said, I know I've been away for about a week or 2 now, so I want to get back into that, get your guys' thoughts from anything that I might have missed since I've been gone. But you're listening to Taking the Field with Stevie Mack. All right, welcome back. Taking the Field with Stevie Mack, getting your comments, your questions in the mix. At Stevie Mack Media is my Twitter handle. You can hit me up there for all show and PLL related content and discussions. From Shrek, Coach Shrek on Twitter, good friend of the show. He says, who wins the most face-offs, for the Cannons versus Water Dogs game this weekend? This is an interesting one because with the rosters now being released for this weekend, neither one will dress a face-off specialist in this game, which is why Shrek is asking this question. Another one was the Chrome not dressing Connor Farrell again this weekend. They did so last weekend as well against Trevor Baptiste in the Atlas, but the Cannons and Water Dogs matchup will be very interesting for that reason, because neither of them will be dressing a face-off specialist in that game. So he says, who wins the most face-offs? And I can't say for sure. I don't really have a specific reason for why I think this, but I would actually lean more towards the Water Dogs, just because I said it a few weeks ago when they were the first team in the PLL to do this. Is I said I feel like this is kind of where they live on faceoffs. They like to really scrap for that ground ball. They're going to box you out. They're going to really just scratch and claw and try to get after that loose ball off the faceoff. They're not necessarily concerned with winning the faceoff cleanly off the clamp like somebody like Trevor Baptiste is. They're going to try to make your life hell going for that loose ball. So I think they're more built, especially from the midfield. I think they're more built for this kind of thing. So I definitely have to lean Water Dogs. But like I said, other than the explanation that I just gave, I can't really say for certain why I feel that way. But like I said, I think they're kind of just more built for kind of creating that sort of chaos in the middle of the field. From Brian, he says, overall thoughts about the last few weeks and key storylines going into the meat of the season. I think that if you talk storylines from the first half of the season, you have, Rob Pennell hitting his career mark, Marcus Holman hitting his career mark, Ryder Garnsey came out just white hot to start the year. It's like everything he looked at was hitting the back of the net. So, I mean, those are a couple. Trevor Baptiste coming out as hot as he's been from the stripe. If you want to say it's because other teams haven't been dressing face-off guys the last few weeks, that's fine. But still, the fact remains he's been going 80, 90%, even close to 100%. I think he was last week. I think he only lost like one or two faceoffs last weekend against the Chrome. So he's another one as far as first half storylines. And I think from a team perspective, a team storyline would be the Cannons, who I talked about in the open of the show, winning those 4 in a row. And I think having every reason and every right to go out and win number 5 this weekend against the Water Dogs. They've been a huge storyline this season, and I think that'll carry over now to these last 4 games. They've gotten this far. They're 4-2 now in the regular season. You've got those 4 games left. How do you play over those last 4 games? Do you continue that run this weekend against the Water Dogs and then on the rest of the way? Or do you fumble a little bit? And I think that it's fair to say that you could see them drop 1 or 2 more games the rest of the way. And that could very well happen this weekend against the Water Dogs. So I don't expect them to just win out the rest of the season, but they are a team and they are a storyline for the rest of the way, like Brian says. From Michael, he says, looking at the standings and the way the Cannons are playing this year, is Cannons head coach Brian Holman a shoo-in for Coach of the Year? What will it take for the Atlas to take down the Archers in Baltimore? So to get to this first part of his question, like I said, I just got done kind of hyping up the Cannons here over the last 4 weeks, but also looking ahead to these last 4 weeks. He wants to know about Coach Holman being in that Coach of the Year conversation, and I think he's definitely earned that right to be a part of that conversation even going into this weekend. But I think if you win again this weekend and you push that winning streak to 5, now you're definitely solidifying yourself as, if he wasn't already one of the top 2 choices. I think that a win this weekend definitely puts him in that top 2 alongside Archers head coach Chris Bates. And he had been somebody in Bates that I had been critical of in the past, saying that you have all this firepower offensively. You essentially have an all-star team of talent on offense, but you've never gotten over that hump, especially when the playoffs come. They've never really been able to get over that hump and go compete for a PLL championship. So could this be the year that Chris Bates and the Archers are able to do that? Maybe the Cannons have something to say about that, and Coach Holman does end up going on to win Coach of the Year. But I'd say, at least right now, maybe recency bias doing its thing, I would definitely say he would get my vote, he being Coach Holman, for Coach of the Year, because of, like I said earlier, the seemingly low expectations for this Cannons team coming into the year, especially once the news came out about Lyle Thompson not playing with them this summer. But what he's been able to do, especially over the past month, him and his coaching staff have been able to do with this team over the past month of the regular season, I think definitely puts him in that top 2 discussion, at least right now, for PLL Coach of the Year. Then he says, what will it take for the Atlas to take down the Archers in Baltimore? Well, I think it goes back to the comments that Mike Pressler made in the opening of the show, telling his guys, look, we saw some things that we think we did really well here this weekend against the Chrome. The face-off thing that they tried definitely seemed like it worked better than what they had been doing in weeks past. So kind of just taking that momentum and just getting that win that they so desperately needed, and just kind of taking what they found that worked in that game and now kind of developing that and building off that over the next few weeks. And that starts this weekend with the Archers. So just kind of taking some of the confidence that they got back with that win a week ago and just keep improving on that and keep trying to stack wins, kind of similar to what the Cannons have been able to do. But as far as what it'll take more specifically for them to take down the Archers this weekend, I think defensively it's just taking another step forward from last weekend. They had been struggling so hard on that side of the field prior to that game against the Chrome. So now that you've kind of seen that you can get stops on defense, now that Jack Cannon's seen that he can make a couple saves when he needs to, and he got back to more of what we're used to seeing from him, and you saw the energy and the intensity, and like I said before, a guy like Tucker Durkin just burying people in the turf every time they tried to dodge on this Atlas defense, playing with that kind of fire and intensity, and doing, as Coach Pressler said, kind of treating these games now the rest of the way as playoff games. I think it's going to take almost perfect execution, and obviously having a guy like Trevor Baptiste that can win you the kind of amount of faceoffs that he's been able to win this year, but almost perfect execution, I would say, especially maximizing the faceoffs in that 32-second possession clock is what it's going to take to pull out a win against the Archers this weekend. And then from @BDowns328 on Twitter, he says, for me, it's about the faceoff. How will the league respond to the negative and positive for next season, and what the effects may be of its influencing the college level? And I think that last part is interesting. He talks about influencing the college level. This is something for me, as somebody that's been around college athletics now for the past 5 years or so, working in college athletics communications and things like that, and has broadcasted for college women's lacrosse for the last 5 years now, and I'll be going into year 6 of doing so this next spring in 2024. But I think for somebody like me, this is something that I think about a lot when I watch the PLL, or even now when I watch something like Athletes Unlimited women's lacrosse, is I wonder if it'll ever kind of change the way that the collegiate level is played. Will they take some things that the professional levels do? Something even as simple as the 2-point arc. Will we ever see a 2-point arc in the college game for either or both men's and women's college lacrosse? So I do think his last point about how something like this face-off rules and things that the PLL is trying, could it influence the college level at some point in time? Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be next year or in 2 years. It could be in 5, maybe 10 years, or maybe just some point in my lifetime as somebody who I'm only about 25 years old. But, I do think that's an interesting thing for me as somebody that I personally, like I said, think about that quite a bit when I watch these professional leagues. And as far as where he says, how will the league respond to the negative and positive? I think there's been a lot of negative feedback from fans of the league as far as the 32-second clock goes, because of what you're seeing as sort of the effect of that, where you have 3 of the 8 teams going into this weekend in Baltimore not even dressing a face-off guy for their clubs, because the 32-second shot clock kind of diminishes that. I mean, the Atlas are one of those teams where, because you have a guy like Trevor Baptiste, you just had to scheme a way to make what he wants to do with winning that clamp back and then kind of going from there. you had to kind of scheme for that and figure out a way to utilize that to your advantage. And I think last week was the first week that we really saw them capable of doing that, and they found some success with that. But for other teams like the Water Dogs, when you had, whether it was James Riley or Zach Tucci, there wasn't really a benefit to having those guys on the roster when they're winning 20 to 30% of their faceoffs. And I think probably one of the more surprising ones was the fact that they decided not to dress Connor Farrell this weekend for the Chrome. But I think even like I said about the Water Dogs, the same thing could be said about the Cannons. I mean, Kelly was only facing off at about 30-40%, I think, to start the year as well. So when it wasn't working, you had to kind of change courses. And for them, changing courses meant, hey, we're going to try something new and not even bother dressing a face-off guy because it's not really providing us any real value. Like, we might as well just stick a long pole out there or just stick any old midfielder out there and kind of just hope for the best and hope that, kind of like what the Water Dogs have been doing, kind of hope that we can scrap for that ground ball and win it every now and then. But yeah, I do think it'll be interesting, how the league looks at how the 32-second shot clock, I think, in specific worked this year, and maybe how they can tweak it a little bit going into next season. But also, like he says, the influence that some of these face-off rules and other rules as well in the pro leagues, how that influences the college level. So that'll do it for this episode of Taking the Field with Stevie Mack. Make sure to like, comment, and share on this post. You can also find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, including Google, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Amazon Music as well. But that'll do it for me. I'll talk to you guys later.